This St. Patrick's Day weekend, the Portland Bureau of Transportation wants to make it a lot easier for you to celebrate safely. From March 14th through the 17th, they're offering discounted taxi and rideshare service rides. So if you're heading to the Kel's Portland Irish Festival on the waterfront, ask any employee and they'll give you a taxi coupon good for up to $20 off one ride. You can also hit up Peabot's website for coupon codes to get $10 off one Lyft or Uber ride within our city limits. Remember, it's never safe to drive impaired, so either let TriMet do the driving or let Peabot help you pay for your ride home. More details at portland.gov/transportation. Today on CityCast Portland, Portland Mercury culture editor Suzette Smith is here to walk us through the Mercury Spring Arts Guide, which is out today. And it focuses on the alliances that artists and arts organizations are forging in the city. Because between the rising cost of living and the craziness of our national politics, Portland's creative communities are finding a need to rely on one another more than ever for survival. So stick around, you might also have the opportunity to lend our local art scene a hand by finding something cool to check out in the next few months. It's Thursday, March 13th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Suzette, each spring, the Portland Mercury puts out a guide previewing the spring art season. And honestly, I think this was the first year that it all kind of coalesced where I'm like, every year, this is so cool. Like, how does this start? Like, how does this happen? Like, how do you guys pick things?
It is interesting because, honestly, it's sort of planned around theater. In the fall, theater companies debut their season, which sort of lines up with the academic calendar. And then in the spring, they have generally their second kind of lump of theater shows. You'll see like every theater house in Portland is having a show right now.
Okay, thank you. I was always curious, like, why fall, spring, and like how you chose things. This all makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we cover art like and culture like all the time in all of our guides, but for the most part, these are the dedicated ones where we can try to pay attention to people that we think are like big movers.
The reason I asked about like why, these guides and previews and everything came out was because I noticed that the stories in this year's issue focus on like alliances. These are all stories about groups or artists or organizations that are working together. Now, why does that feel like an important theme or metaphor for our art scenes right now? Like, why was that your guidepost in a sense?
Yeah, I guess that I think that everybody's in the thick of it at the moment. The greater national government is sort of really depressing everyone and making everyone anxious. These are general terms, but that's predominantly what's happening in Portland's art scene. We don't really have to argue that. And so it seems like focusing on alliances right now, I mean, I don't want to be like stronger together because like that didn't work. But no. But I am saying, like on a small scale, the person who walks super slow in your building, don't just dodge around them on the way to the elevator or the stairs. Just take a sec, chill, be a cool neighbor. Or there's lots of people that I personally have like a professional rivalry with, but we actually have more in common.
Is it me? Am I your op?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But we have more in common, Claudia.
It's true.
It's exciting to feel competition with you, but also just recognizing that you and I are on the same page about a lot of things.
100%. Yeah.
And I just want to celebrate that.
Oh.
And then also, like, hopefully support you, hopefully rely on you sometimes.
I'm always here, Suzette.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got that out of the way because there was a lot of tension. Well, I wanted to discuss a few stories in your spring arts guide. I hope people listening don't think that was real. Please know that was a joke. It's okay.
It's also like no one cares about my rivalries. Like I can feel them all day long and they are totally imaginary because they exist just between me and like the too many cups of coffee I had in the morning,
Yeah, I totally know. Okay, well, I wanted to discuss a few stories in your spring arts guide. First, let's talk about music. Your colleague Nolan Parker interviewed Portland City Councilman Jamie Dunphy about ways to push the music scene forward, and he's been a vocal critic of Live Nation coming into Portland, which it is. But what new ideas is he offering?
Nolan Parker's actually our new music editor, brand new to the staff. But yeah, Nolan sat down with Jamie Dunphy just because they thought it would be like a good idea to get to know this politician that ran on a platform of safeguarding, supporting Portland's music scene, its working class musicians, the venues. So Jamie Dunphy has some interesting ideas to try to make new construction projects make it required that if they build next door to a venue, like a pre-existing venue, they need to include soundproofing, which I think is like interesting. He uses an example of a jazz club in Alberta where there was like a new building that went up and then suddenly there were all these complaints about the jazz club, which had been there.
Yeah. It makes sense though, because it's like you're moving in here. You need to think ahead about the neighborhood as opposed to just obliterating or complaining. This seems like a good neighbor rule.
Yeah. And I mean, I would love to see buildings just include soundproofing because I've been in several new construction buildings that my friends live in. And I've been like, oh my God, what is that?
Yeah, well, you could hear like a cat sneeze outside. You're like, what the fuck, man? Which, by the way, has happened in my house. But my house was like 100 years old. But literally a cat sneezed outside. And I was like, can you hear me right now, cat? I'm like whispering. I'm like, can you hear me? I can hear you. Soundproofing would be amazing.
Yeah, it seems like a good idea. Dunphy is also, we have a strange noise code in Portland that has like two different ways you can do it. And the way that involves the police coming to your venue is not very measured. Like one involves like a decibel meter and the other one involves, can the police hear you from the street, I believe. And so I think that as a city councilor, Dunphy is trying to hopefully make those a little bit more understandable, make them something we can measure because it's so difficult for venues. They don't want to keep getting noise violations. They don't want to keep being loud.
Yeah. I like this. It's in a sense, like how can we all get along and not squash art or push out music venues? I hope that happens.
Yeah.
I hope that he pushes that forward. Well, you're also publishing an article by TJ Asena about the play Antipodes that's running at Shaking the Tree Theater. And I understand you're a big fan of Shaking the Tree, which I've actually never heard of. Like, what do you think they're doing that is so special or different?
I bet you've been to Shaking the Tree. Okay. They have a warehouse in Southeast Portland. And I bet if you were in there, you'd be like, I have been here.
Oh, yeah.
But Samantha Vandermeer is the founder of Shaking the Tree and also its artistic director. And she directed this play. She always has just like a really interesting idea visually. Like this is a very simple set. It takes place in kind of like a creative writer's room, but she has made the bottom of the set like it expands as it goes down. So you have like a table that expands as it goes down in the room itself, like it's wider. So it just creates this feeling of unease. And then also like Samantha is really great at kind of picking out local talent. Like there's Rebier Foster in this play, Ken Yoshikawa, Rocco Wire. These are all like actors that in a play that I've seen before, like in another production, they were like the standouts. So it's really interesting to have kind of the who's who of local theater in Shaking the Trees, the Antipodes. So I think like I would see it for that reason. I'm planning on seeing this, even though I haven't yet. But TJ gave it a positive review and said it was really worth it.
So you're calling out that the set design's like really interesting.
Mm-hmm. There's always good set design at Shaking the Tree.
Cool. And then it's a collection of some of the best actors in town. But what is the play about?
It is sort of about a bunch of writers in a writer's room trying to come up with like an amazing story. And they're sort of dealing with a toxic boss who is playing them against each other. It can't help but be funny because people like Ken Yoshikawa are like so funny. I saw Ken in another production and just everything that they did was just like insanely funny. TJ's review doesn't give away what happens. There was like one review that Shaking the Tree shared with readers that was like, don't read this one because it's a spoiler if you don't like spoilers. But TJ says that at some point things kind of jump the shark and get really meta, which I personally very much enjoy, especially if it's like when things get weird in a boring setting, you know, at that point you're just watching like comedy like Office Space or something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's like Office Space, but maybe it's like Office Space.
Are you saying it's like Office Space? Because that's what we're Antipodes. It's like Office Space.
It's like Office Space, and everyone will be like really confused.
I'm excited to watch it now. You actually did sell it to me.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. And when we return, more art picks from Portland Mercury's Arts and Culture team.
CityCast Portland is brought to you by Diamore Law Group. Let's face it, sometimes bad stuff happens. A serious injury, a catastrophic accident, or even a wrongful death. It can turn your world upside down. When it does, you deserve unwavering support from a dedicated team. Yep, you need a lawyer. Diamore Law Group has over 30 years of experience protecting the rights of Oregonians. Their team of skilled attorneys, led by distinguished trial attorney Tom Diamore, will work tirelessly to make sure your voice is heard and your rights are protected. Here's what one of his clients said. Tom fights for his clients from the first day they meet him through the last day of trial. If you or a loved one needs help holding those responsible for your injuries accountable, contact Diamore Law Group at 503-222-6333 or visit diamorelaw.com to schedule a free consultation. They are committed to fighting for the justice and compensation you deserve right here in Portland.
Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
Well, you yourself also wrote a story about two local indie bookstores that are across the street from each other, and they could possibly, just like us, be ops. But you're seeing a possibility for them to support each other. Like, what's going on with literary arts and Mother Foucault's?
So, literary arts is not new as an organization. It's been around for a pretty long time. It's like a nonprofit that is pretty much based on, supporting writers. They do a lot of workshops. And then now they have a bookstore. I think they wanted to create a space where people would be coming in regularly. What was so funny to me about this story was that Literary Arts has been planning to move into this specific building. The pandemic happened. They fundraised for 2 years. They raised a tremendous amount of money to seismically retrofit the building. And then they finally move in. And then Mother Foucault's a month later gets 100 people to carry their books 2 blocks and moves across the street.
Oh, wow.
It's the type A organization that is trying so hard to do the exactly perfect thing. And then you have this fun indie bookshop, Mother Foucault's, which is Craig Florence, the guy who works Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and a bunch of volunteers. So it's just a very different organization of people. You just walk in and you're sort of do you work here? And they're no, I'm just helping assemble a bookcase,
Yeah.
They're kind of almost like when the Wendy's moves across from the Burger King and maybe create more business together. Mother Foucault's isn't actually open yet. It's sort of in disarray at the moment. You could still go in there and probably talk to Craig Florence about books. He would love it. But they have a sign on their door that is we're going to be open January 29th, and it's crossed out. And then it's definitely going to be March 14th for sure. So it's
Okay.
yes, absolutely March 14th for sure. But it's also been crossed out a few times. But I think that, they're not going to be competing necessarily because literary arts has a very general focus. They want to be whatever book people want to read. So in that way, they are aligned. And Mother Foucault's is also very old, kind of dust-bound leather tomes. And then also just a ton of poetry. Craig Florence really cares a lot about poetry and criticism of theater, it turns out. I feel together they will create sort of a pull of book literary fans at that corner.
That's so cool. Well, let's talk about visual arts real quick because I feel we've hit them all except for visual arts. And there is an exhibit right now at the Portland Art Museum that I found really interesting, Monet's Floating World exhibit.
Yeah.
The reason why I thought it was so cool is that they have, Monet's what's that, water lilies piece?
Mm-hmm.
But what I heard is that they're also putting it within context of his influences because he's always been very, very, Monet had always been very clear, oh no, there are these Japanese masters that I'm pretty much inspired by. And the Portland Art Museum has put it within context of these Japanese masters. And I think that's so cool. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, Lindsay Costello wrote about that for us. And she was able to really kind of dig in and pay attention to the idea that Monet would have actually had a bunch of these ukiyo Japanese master's prints around his home even. So to combine this one portrait that Portland Art Museum has recently restored of like the water lilies with all of these floating world Japanese prints of the time that are of kind of, nature scenes or like showing movement. It's interesting to see, like, kind of by itself, we could have all gone and looked at like one painting, but then it's amazing to see it within the context of other paintings that would have been really influential on Monet.
That's so cool. I hope that the Portland Art Museum does more groundings like this, because I feel like because of how we were educated and where we live, there isn't quite the connection between what has inspired something. Let's just put it that way. And so people sometimes are just like, oh, Claude Monet, the friggin' originator of like this type of painting. And it's like, no, but it's pretty. Like he did a good job with, but it comes from something. It's more of just like, here's culture as a whole. And I feel like more people would be engaged with art if it was connected to something more tangible than do I like this painting or not?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this in itself, because the Portland Art Museum is such like a pretty big art institution, certainly the biggest in the area. It like has all these different curators, these people who've kind of dedicated their whole lives to getting extremely good at these extremely detailed professions. And now they're all able to kind of, because Portland Art Museum is so involved in the greater art world, like kind of come together and work on this important project.
That's so cool. Well, before we wrap up, I want to give you the opportunity to just shout out like one more thing that is coming up this season that we didn't discuss that you're just like, oh, this is a really cool pick.
So something I'm really excited about is Patricia Vasquez Gomez. She has an interesting video installation that is debuting at Pica this week. Patricia, she herself is from Mexico, and so had always wanted to kind of know an indigenous language and be more connected to kind of where she came from. And so she had like been studying Mayan indigenous language on an academic sense, but she was working with these children in Oregon whose families had immigrated here, and the children themselves were not perhaps fluent in the academic sense that Patricia was, but they had like the same tones. They had this certain rhythm to the language that she herself had not like really been able to experience yet. So those two things coming together is kind of present in this show at Pica, which is called Water, Smoke, Word, but then it's presented in a bilingual sense, which I think is pretty cool.
Have you seen it? Is it up yet?
No, the installation opens on the 13th. So it'll actually, like, the guide comes out and so does the installation, which is interesting the way that happened. That's why we asked a writer to do a Q&A preview with the artist to get an idea. It's going to be a video installation. So people go in on kind of like an hourly basis and watch the movie, which I believe is like 30 to 45 minutes long.
It's like a movie, or is it just a lot of video screens? And
I would say, I don't know yet because I haven't seen it, but I bet that it is sort of like a cool vibes piece.
You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's a cool vibes, Well, I'm excited to check that out. It's mostly shot in the Yucatan municipalities of Amani and Dizan with audio recorded in Portland. So that's pretty cool, just that connection. Well, Suzette, thank you so much for just hanging out and giving us a little preview of your spring arts guide.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking about art. This is the time when we pay attention to art, everybody. It's news, but now it's art.
And now for some events happening this week. Every Thursday on the show, we like to bring you a few recommendations to help you plan your weekend, and here's what we got. Tonight at 5:30 p.m., Portland Spirit is embarking on one of their wine-tasting sunset cruises. They call it Wine on the Water, and they host over a dozen local wineries. And for 2 hours, you're just sipping wine and cruising on the Willamette. And at the end, they give you like a little souvenir tasting cup, which sounds so cute. Full disclosure, we were given a few free passes, so a few of us on the team are going to check it out tonight. I'm so excited. It's been on my bucket list for a while now, and Portland Spirit is scheduling more of these kinds of cruises. If you missed this one, we'll definitely share pics of our experience on our Instagram. Also tonight, the Patricia Vasquez Gomez video installation Suzette just told us about, Water, Smoke, Word, is open for exhibit at the Portland Institute for Contemporary Art from 5 to 8 p.m., and it is absolutely free. This Friday, you can also go check out the Rose City Rollers at 8 p.m. at Oaks Park. That's not free, but there's drinks and food and plenty of parking if you do drive. Also this weekend, as you might know, there's a ton of St. Patrick's Day festivities taking place downtown, which includes Kel's Portland Irish Festival at the Tom McCall Waterfront Park. And just a reminder that Peabot has free $10 coupon codes on their site for Lyft and Uber, no strings attached. And if you go to the Irish Festival on the waterfront, any employee should be able to direct you to a $20 coupon for a cab ride home. So please do not drive drunk. Also, just take a bus. For even more local news and events, sign up for our daily newsletter, Hey Portland, or check out our site, portland.citycast.fm/events. We'll throw all links in the show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend, rate or leave us a review. It really does help us out. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.